Are you tired of seeing the same meta builds in your games in Darktide, running into the same melee and range weapons on allies such as dueling swords and bolters? Do you need a refresh? When starting in Darktide, there are lots of weapons to try out, our big man not included, and some are certainly better than others. This leads to an overwhelming amount of people running what weapons are at the height of the meta and refusing to try anything else. But did you know there are some underrated weapons that can still pack some punch on Auric difficulty missions? With a bit of skill and a little time invested in learning how these weapons operate, you can slice down any target with ease. I'm Seb from the Warhammies, and today we're going to be looking at some of Darktide's most underrated weapons and why I think you should give them a try. Make sure to hit that subscribe button if you enjoy the content. First off, let's talk about what weapons fill the meta, especially after the recent update. This is not an exhaustive list, but stuff that is rightly powerful and fun to play on certain classes. Old Faithfuls for melee weapons would include the dueling sword and combat blade, but for range weapons, point and click plasma guns and bolters really do sit in the meta strongly, especially when it comes to one-shot revolvers. While these weapons are powerful, they get repetitive if you play them in every game. For those who watch my build videos, this is why I design them around different weapons to give specific playstyles for each. In terms of range weapons, I love the bolter, it's a true staple of the franchise, and if built correctly, just deletes most things in front of you. Since the weapons were shared between classes, class identity around weapons has been somewhat removed, and weapons that floated under the radar are now just completely ignored. With that out of the way, let's hop into some underrated weapons, and others that can maybe do with a little bit of a buff. So first off, we have our surprising powerhouse, the Vigilant auto rifle. I wouldn't blame you if you had no idea these weapons existed in Darktide. Who needs a burst rifle in a game like this? Granted, these weapons are terrible. They've got low damage, shred through ammo, and are like slapping a heretic with a rag that the servitors use to clean the Morningstar. That being said, there is one mark that shines above the rest. This is the Mark 9 Vigilant Autogun. For those who don't know the difference, it's the green one. I only found out about this when trying to level up my weapons for penance points, thinking I'll take it into a game and see how it goes. Honestly, this thing chews through heretics faster than a Cyber Mastiff. Taking a look at the gameplay behind, you can see it's a powerhouse with the ammo to boot. When combined with Veteran's Focus Fire, it can do a surprising amount of damage to most targets. Personally, to get the most out of this, I'd recommend running Blessing's No Respite and Crucian Roulette. No Respite gives you an up to 20% extra damage on stagger, and Crucian Roulette gives you an additional 0.6% crit chance per shot fired, which stacks until you reload. Obviously, the higher capacity, the higher ammo stat you have, the more you'll get out of this. The gun has an innately high critical damage, doing over double damage on crit, and combining these with the two blessings really allows it to maximise its damage potential. On the flip side, looking at the other two marks, it's clear to see why the Vigilant auto rifles get a bit bad reputation, and why it's ignored by most of the player base. Just look at them. There's a fast burst rifle that's uncontrollable on console, and a DMR that's surpassed by the bolter in every way. While it's nice to see at least one mark be useful, the other two could do with some buffs. Firstly, that DMR mark, there's not enough piercing and it's got little precision damage. It doesn't do enough. Sometimes it takes upwards of 3 headshots to kill something. That's terrible for a gun, what used to be the marksman rifle. Giving this weapon a little bit more damage and less ammo, kind of being the sniper's option of the weapons, could keep it kind of crawling out of the hole that it's currently in. For the faster burst mark, I'd give it some silly stagger so it can actually combine with the stagger buffs. Meaning, while it does barely any damage, it'd be hilarious with me knocking everything over or making them stumble when they're running towards you. The blessings for the Vigilant auto rifles also don't help it being underrated. They are designed for a slow-paced sniper weapon. Now, in a game like Darktide that's incredibly fast-paced and all about hordes on higher difficulties, these just don't slot into the actual gameplay. Ways around this, again, would be to have that innate horde clear through precision shots, so if it just slots through enemies' heads, potentially give it a silly cleave. But they don't really work when other meta weapons have such effective combinations at being great at dealing with hordes, as well as precision targets. Moving on to our next weapon. If I said a weapon would require a bit of strategy in Darktide, you'd probably look at me and think, what the hell are you talking about? So this brings us on to our next weapon, the Braced Autogun. I have not seen a braced autogun in a long time. There was a point where every zealot I saw was running one of these. However, those days are long gone, and now they just sit gathering dust in most people's inventories. The braced autogun's most desirable factor, and what makes it unique, is exactly why it doesn't see a lot of game time. It's braced rather than aimed. This means it's better at close range rather than long, and the reason you take a ranged weapon is to deal with ranged targets. This is made worse by the fact that after the update to gunners that came out with Havoc, you actually need to apply a bit of strategy using this weapon, that otherwise they'll laser beam you. What this gun has going for it, rather than being viable all the way up to Havoc 40, is that it's so satisfying and fun to use. When bracing, you move slower, but retain your field of view, and allows you to feel like an 80s action hero just mowing down a horde that's running towards you. What's surprising about this weapon and what makes it underrated is it has access to some powerful and frankly underused blessings. This being stripped down, gaining a ranged immunity while sprinting over 50% stamina. Yes, granted, you have to build into this, you have to take stamina curios and sprint efficiency curios, but when running with those extra curios, you can get rid of the weakest part of the weapon. Long range damage, you can just close that distance with sprinting. You could also double this up with hit and run, so when your stamina dips below that 50, you just brace the weapon and start spraying at a horde that's coming towards you or weak targets, giving you immunity for 1 second on close range kill. This allows you to plink away at hordes as you move up to the ranged targets and get closer to use your beloved melee weapons to smite the Emperor's foes. I personally like the Mark IV as it allows a fast fire rate and higher ammo capacity, meaning you can sprint and shoot and just mow things down. The last underrated weapon I wanted to talk about is what I would describe as being the unsung hero of the Imperium. This is the beloved Laspistol. It's one of 40k's most iconic weapons, but when was the last time you saw it in a game? That's because it's outshone by a lot of weapons after you level up. However, the Mark II, that's the starting pistol for the Psyker class, has its moments. If built for critical damage, it does some ridiculous output with an intense fire rate. This is most notable on Psyker, where most builds for a gun Psyker would probably fall a bit flat on the overall damage of a weapon, because it's difficult to do. Most other classes get inherent range buffs. The Psyker, well, he's designed around his staffs, so that's where the damage lies in that tree. However, if you look at a bit of crit chance on this build, it can get silly. This means the Laspistol can deal with anything up to and including enemies wearing flak armour, just chewing through with hip firing. It does a silly amount of damage when you get a critical, which can be further buffed by picking up the Dum Dum blessing, where each close range shot deals an extra 6% damage on hit, stacking up to 5 times, and Desperado, which increases your critical chance for 2 seconds on successful dodge. Where this weapon gets silly is when you build it into a critical build. By combining all of the crit chance buffs on Psykers, which we're just going to list quickly, includes 12.5% via the Desperado blessing, the pistol having an inherent 10% weapon-based critical chance, 5% extra from the perk that you're going to want to take, 7.5% of Psyker's base chance, 7.5% for your coherency buff, plus 20% from Scry's Gaze, 5% from the additional talents node after Scry's Gaze, which, when added all together, is a total of 72.5% crit chance. Obviously, you won't be running this at optimum all of the time, and you could switch out the 12.5% from Desperado for another blessing, such as the one that sets enemies on fire when you hit them with critical, or Raking Fire, that's just a flat damage buff to shooting things in the back. Really handy when an enemy turns to deal with the target. The Mark II will always have a special place in my heart, especially as the fact it was one of the first weapons I used in the game, and I just love the look of Laspistols. But it's surprisingly one of the most underrated weapons in the game. None of this can be said for the bigger brother, the Mark X though, but that's a whole nother story that we'll deal with another day. So we've covered looking at some of the underrated weapons within Darktide. Do you think you'll be trying any of these out? We've got a burst rifle that can output a surprising amount of damage when built correctly, a strategic braced autogun that requires you to think about what you're doing, and lastly, a Laspistol that can blast through anything, obviously carapace armour not included. When playing Darktide, give some of the weapons you've never touched a go. It may not be the meta-killing machine that you want to get yourself through to Havoc 40, but you may just find an absolute gem that's fun to play with. If you've been playing a while, you most likely have a god-rolled version just sitting in your inventory, with its machine spirit just wanting to be set 3 to purge some heretics. Share your favourite underrated weapon down in the comments below, and subscribe for more Darktide content. I hope you enjoyed the video. I'll catch you in the next one.